friends. It's Thursday, May 30th, and we've got some Chapo for you. Today, Felix and I are joined by a couple bastards, a couple law bastards. That's right. It's Andy and Tim from the ALAB podcast. Indeed, all lawyers are bastards. And today we'll be discussing the majesty of American law. I should say it is quite fortuitous, Andy and Tim, that we've had you on today at 5 p.m. East Coast time, because as I hit record on this show, the verdict in the Trump, business fraud Stormy Daniels case is currently being read in a Lower Manhattan courtroom. I guess our eyes will be peeled for how that all plays out.
The last dispatch from BBC that I got is Trump no longer laughing with his lawyer. So,
I guess let's just start there. Boys, from a practicing lawyer perspective, have you been following the Trump trial? What have you made of it so far? And do we have any predictions in the last seconds before one can actually render such a thing?
I've been breathlessly following this with Ian Millhiser, actually. We do a weekly podcast.
That's my slime.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been following this too closely. I think, obviously the fate of the republic and democracy and all that is at stake. But really, kind of at the end of the day, this is about a shady businessman doing shady businessman dealings because he fucked a porn star. And, it's not necessarily going to be the kind of deep policy thing that interests me, I guess, from day to day.
I guess I'm just wondering, what the practical ramifications are. I mean, if he's acquitted, I mean, that's obvious. He'll just, go on continuing to, live, laugh, love. But if he is convicted on one or all of these charges, what does that imply? Is he facing jail time? Can he still run for president? I'm sure there'll be a lengthy appeals process. What are the ramifications of a guilty verdict on one or any of these charges?
Yeah, I mean, the ramifications are mostly for the press right now. The first thing that'll happen is you'll get an appeal instantly. And that appeal there's no way it would be resolved before the election. But as for the actual sentencing possibilities and stuff like that, I have no idea.
It potentially carries jail time, but I would imagine most people who get charged with this violation get a fine, some kind of slap on the wrist. It would be very unlikely that he went to jail for this.
He's charged with causing false entries in a New York entity. This is not. He's not charged with the more salacious type facts that everybody talks about when you reference the case.
Yeah,
exactly. He's not charged with having sex.
Right. He's not charged with fucking Stormy Daniels. And even though everybody talks about election interference, I don't think that's a charge in the case at all.
No, it kind of goes in around it in that you can get an enhanced process. I think if the falsification of the document was in furtherance of a separate crime, that's what a lot of the trial has been hinging on. But even then, it's not directly bringing in any of the democratic, threats to democracy that Trump supposedly is. This is all about business records and only that, really, this particular trial.
Well, we'll be checking updates to see what happens with that. But I guess a lot of stuff to talk about. Whether judges' wives can hang flags, we will be talking about.
Yeah,
I definitely
that's some more interesting stuff.
Yeah, this story I love. I definitely want to get into Flag Hag Gate, as I'm calling it, and just sort of generally what it is with the sort of frumpy wives of Republican Supreme Court justice appointees that are what makes them so feral. I don't know, but before we get into that, I would just like to do a little bit of house cleaning myself from the Chapo Department of Corrections. And this touches on something we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. When I said that the funniest thing Jerry Seinfeld has done on television since Seinfeld ended was the Michael Richards apology, that was in fact on Letterman, not Leno. So I will be docking my pay for misremembering that. But I'd also like to dock my pay and apologize to Jerry Seinfeld because really, literally right after I said this guy hasn't been funny for 30 years, he comes out this week with probably the funniest thing I've seen on TV in a long time. His interview with Bari Weiss.
It's incredible.
I know you saw this. It's just him giving her nothing for 30 seconds while he
nothing.
He gives her nothing for 30 seconds while he just attempts to fake a human emotion and then just ends up going,
You were in Israel since the war started. How was that trip? The most powerful experience of my life.
Really?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Why?
You just.
I'm not even sure he went to Israel, honestly. I'm not even sure he knows what Israel is after that.
I feel like that was the result of a brainstorming session. Like, it was immediately after they dropped a bunch of like hyper accurate bombs on a refugee encampment, and they were like, everyone's like more mad at us than usual. What do we do? All right, we need the least genuine human being who has ever lived and the most annoying newswoman of all time to cry together. We need both of them to have like an emotional moment, or like what two Komodo dragons would think an emotional moment would be.
Yeah, just like their eyes blinking once every hour, and then occasionally a tongue flicking out to dart away a fly.
Yeah. I don't know who this is for. Like, who's on the fence about this stuff? Who, like, someone who's like, they were passively Zionist as like a default, and as anyone who followed American politics in the last 30 years may have been. And then they see everything that we've all seen for the past like 8 months, and then they're like, I'm rethinking this. And then they see Seinfeld cry, and they're like, I don't know, I think I'm back on the winning team.
Well, the funny thing is, he didn't actually cry.
That's the one thing you could.
Yeah.
All the headlines are like Jerry Seinfeld cries in interview with Barry Weiss, and I was like, this I gotta see. But what I actually saw was something so much more powerful, which was like a replicant trying to pass a void comp test by squeezing a tear out to evince human emotion. Yeah.
It looked like an episode of Curb where like Larry David like accidentally got on like an interview for Israel, and like they were like, was it personal for you? Like, that's how he would act in exactly the same way.
And as long as we're on it, I mean, I know everyone's mad at Jerry Seinfeld for a lot of good reasons, but we don't need to retcon this whole idea that Larry David was some kind of sleeper agent who created Seinfeld to embarrass Jerry Seinfeld and attack his politics.
Dude, Larry David invented gritty.
But like Jerry's failure to produce a human emotion was just merely one element of this hilarious interview. I mean, it produced the headline, Jerry Seinfeld calls for a return of dominant masculinity. Quote, I like real men.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by this one, because like when I saw that headline, I thought, oh, this is like he's seen like a Jordan Peterson video. This is going to be like boring boilerplate conservative bullshit, like that kicker guy. But what he actually came out with was funnier than anything I could have ever imagined.
It's unreal. Because I mean, like, in addition to using his co-star from the Unfrosted movie, Hugh Grant, as his example of unparalleled masculinity, because he, quote,
Totally
has stories at dinner parties and knows how to get a drink. That was awesome. But he also, I mean, he said, when I grew up, there were like men's men, and he used the examples of Muhammad Ali, JFK, Sean Connery, and Howard Cosell. Which I thought was like, which of these things just doesn't belong?
It's how you get into showbiz. You have to have one of those. It's the rule of fives.
So my apologies to Jerry Seinfeld. This was, I mean, like, you've come back with a vengeance, producing some of the funniest comedy that I've seen in a long time. And I hope you keep it. I hope he keeps it up. Okay, to get back into the realm of the law.
Well, I do have to update that as of now, Trump found guilty all 34 counts of felony falsifying business records. So
wow,
he is now convicted felon.
destroyed.
He actually has to go to Azkaban, which is really weird.
Damn, it's real?
So,
We have a quote from Mr. Trump here. I'm going to jack off so much in this MF. That is Donald Trump commenting on his Truth Social.
He's going to try and appeal and hold off so that him and P. Diddy get in there at the same time.
To be honest, I really was not following the trial at all.
No, I wasn't either. It's boring.
I heard the
It's
one
just
news
stupid.
report. I heard the one news report about the media diet, and then you see the guy who gets his news from Truth Social, and I was like, "Oh, this is fucking done." But apparently, that was completely wrong.
Yeah, he got convinced. There must have been some real Aaron Sorkin-ass speeches in there to convince the Truth Social guy. Who I did also see that he seemed to have been doing like some snarking and like laughing along when the defense was screwing up and all that. But he seemed to have taken his job seriously, and he defended American democracy with all his might until he gets killed.
I also thought, and I got to eat this one. I also thought that the DOJ had been holding off on this. The facts on this have been clear for a long time, for like years. So I was like, where the fuck was this case? You guys clearly want to spring it in the election year, and if that blows up in your face and you get a hung jury in the summer, then you blew your chance. But I got that wrong too, because it turns out that I guess it worked.
I guess maybe the feds had their monetary damages rule, and they're just real sticklers about it. They're just like, no, this case is under a certain amount, not taking it no matter what.
I mean, like, it's been very clear that the because like if you watch like cable news, like they're fucking camped out here like it's the Kennedy assassination or something, and it's been very clear that like Democrats are certainly like have been. I mean, like, well, Joe Biden hasn't even been like campaigning or even saying why anyone should vote for him for president,
right?
And I think they've been like they've been intending to just have this trial do all the work for them, and like the entire country has been watching it. Like as rapturously as people, as MSNBC or CNN is covering it. And I just don't think the thing is like, if Trump were a normal president, this would be a huge story, but like everybody already knows that he's like a complete crook and whoremonger. So like, this is not going to change anyone's perception of Donald Trump. I guess I'm just interested whether it'll change his, like, now as a convicted felon, even with an appeals process ongoing. Can you still run for president? Can you still be president if you're a convicted felon?
I think this is sort of uncharted territory.
Yeah, I think so
too. One thing's for sure, you're going to hear nothing but this. This is going to be victory laps for 6 fucking months on this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they're going to push it as much as they can. They're going to want to say that Trump should probably go to prison for this.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, expect to see a lot of people get very mad when he gets sentenced in the way that rich people are normally sentenced in this country, which is to say barely at all.
I don't know, a shit ton of felonies. He might be in trouble.
Yeah.
He's getting sent to a gladiator academy, like Longboat or San Quentin.
It would be funny if it, like, instead of going to like a regular federal prison, like the kind that Sam Bankman-Fried would go to, they sent him to like county.
That would be amazing.
And he wins. He has to be president from county.
That would be awesome.
He has to like direct the Indonesian war from like a Samsung phone.
He has to host state dinners, and they just make like ramen burritos with like, Cheetos. Him and Rishi Sunak are eating that in the cafeteria.
His cabinet is just all guys who are in and out of county. It's like Lil Reese.
I was gonna say Lil Pump is his man on the outside probably at that point.
It's funny to think about like Secret Service details. Like, do they have to get like detailed to fucking jail? Like,
you gotta get sexed in to become a Secret Service agent.
I'm thinking about a Secret Service agent like solemnly drinking a thing of Mad Dog and crashing his car into a police station so he could get sent to county. This is my duty.
They have to get all the fake bags of all the fake cigarettes and whatnot also as part of their job.
The Pentagon has to like fly in like Reaper drones to drop K2 into the yard for Trump to sell.
Well, I guess tonight Trump will be spending some time in the 6th borough. That's right, Rikers Island, as he awaits sentencing.
Shout out to Mueller, she wrote, who didn't have even the slightest thing to do with this, but I'm sure is celebrating very hard right now.
Well, Andy, in the sort of like the juror, like, I don't know, sort of entrail reading, they were like going down the media diets of these jurors, and one of them said that they had listened to the Mueller, she wrote podcast, but I mean
that did it. That's what knocked it out.
Yep. I mean, and that's also why this verdict will be overturned on appeal. Is that one of the jurors was listening to Mueller, she wrote. But I mean, like, and then I guess the other thing is that, like, I guess when this happened, I mean, well, look, that's what I get for doubting federal prosecutors. I was like, well, this is probably the weakest case they have against Donald Trump.
I thought so.
Turned all 39 counts, convicted on all 39 counts. I guess federal prosecutors really do know what they're doing.
One of the things that happened in the trial was like at least what both sides seem to think that it came down to was like Michael Cohen's credibility. He's the key witness. He's the one that knows what happens and what happened, and is making the allegations of Donald Trump's knowledge in 2016. But the defense had a good point that like this guy's sort of a proven liar. But maybe what the jury looks at is like, does a guy who's convicted of this crime and who, was setting up a shell corporation to make these payments, is he going to lie about this? Like, he wasn't doing it for free. He wasn't doing it out of the goodness of his heart.
I did like, this is from the Washington Post, highlights of closing arguments in Trump's New York trial. It says here, Todd Blanche, Trump's defense lawyer, spent much of his closing arguments filleting Michael Cohen, Trump's former fixer and the prosecution's key witness. Blanche told jurors Cohen lied to each of you during the trial, calling him biased and motivated to tell you a story that is not true. He also invoked the acronym GOAT, which is often used in sports context to describe someone as the greatest of all time. During his closing remarks, Blanche dubbed Cohen the Gloat, saying he's literally the greatest liar of all time.
That it reminds me of towards the end of Goodfellas when all the guys are on trial because of Henry's testimony, and the skeezy lawyer, he looks at Paul Sorvino and is like, "Don't worry, I got this. Like, you're gonna be out of here." And he just he dashes up to the witness stand and he's like, "Aren't you a fucking rat?" And that seems to be that was his defense team's entire strategy. Didn't you fucking snitch?
And the thing is, Michael Cohen is a snitch and a liar. But the thing is, this doesn't help Trump or his defense because he worked for Donald Trump for years.
Right.
So if he's the greatest liar of all time, then why was Trump having him on the payroll for as long as he did? Why was he?
He's the greatest liar of all time on your behalf.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
That actually makes you really credible when you say, I did this, that, and the other thing on this date with this amount of money for Donald Trump. That's probably the one thing you can tell the truth about really, really well.
Yeah, and the reason he was lying, Andy, is you're right. The reason he was lying is because Donald Trump was paying him to. And the reason it's likely that he's not lying now is that he made a deal with the federal government to avoid jail time. So, if you lie under that circumstances, it's a little bit different than lying for Donald Trump. I guess my other favorite...
He's clearly not a good enough lawyer to bamboozle the government. Also,
no,
that's very obvious.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's inherent about him. Clearly,
another details of Michael Cohen that I really liked that came out in this trial is that the money that he was given for the payoff, he was he asked for more money because he would have to pay taxes on the money that Trump gave him to cover this up.
Yeah,
which is I love that idea. It's pay me for the job, but then pay me extra because I'm going to have to pay taxes on the money that you're giving me.
Yeah, I do that at work too.
Employers hate this loophole where you can get infinite money. You just keep needing more and more money to pay the extra taxes.
Well, I guess the other thing to consider here is back when this trial started, I was just gee, what's going to happen if he's acquitted or the trial doesn't go well. But then the other thing is that he's also facing numerous other trials that are just haven't even started yet. For things like election interference, which at the time I thought the Georgia case was a much stronger one because he's literally on recorded on. It's evidence just saying, hey, could you steal this election in Georgia for me?
Yeah, do me a favor real quick.
Yeah, but find precisely the number of ballots I need to win right now.
In Georgia, he has King Vaughn's lawyer, though. So that one, okay. I'm more confident about his chances. He has offset, the number one lawyer for rappers, Drew Fendling. I don't know. This seems to be the first competent lawyer he's ever hired. So maybe he gets off here.
Right. I mean, it's on Rico, right? He hired him for a reason. So yeah, this is somewhat well trod ground. And the prosecutor there, Fonnie Willis, I know had their own issues, right, with paying her husband or boyfriend.
That thing was a fucking disaster.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in that case.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that's delayed till well after is that I actually haven't followed, but it seemed like that case was going to get delayed for a significant period of time.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, but because, if he wins re-election, right, presumably these trials are going to be ongoing, but couldn't he just pardon himself? Couldn't he just be give himself a presidential pardon?
You can pardon federal crimes, but I don't know if he can pardon himself. I'm not sure anybody's going to go for that. Even his handpicked Supreme Court, I don't think people are going to let that slide. What will probably happen, although they will say it's not happening, is that you'll have, new U.S. attorneys all get put in by the new administration, and then you will have some of the cases, decide to get dropped or some things get narrowed. Maybe there will be some talk about independent prosecutors, but for state charges, he has no power over them. Well, direct power over them. He can obviously exert force through, Republican operatives in the Georgia government or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think if he wins election, it is going to be really uncharted territory.
Yeah.
That is so funny to me because were it not for Sam Alito being on the Supreme Court, the stakes of it are so unbelievably low that it is so funny that the Washington Post had this story for years, and then they were like, let's just sit on this or whatever. And look,
if my grandmother told me this story about her neighbor, I would bury her. I wouldn't even send her to a home. I'd be like, your funeral's tomorrow.
But I guess the import of the story is that it basically what it's come down to with Alito with being forced to respond to this story has become about Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito's rock solid commitment to the right to privacy of one very specific woman.
Yes. Well, okay. So that's interesting. That's one way to take it. I actually think that his commitment in the letter is my wife's, first of all, is fucking stupid.
Yes.
And she's a dummy. And I don't agree with anything that she does. I don't even know what she's doing. And actually, the guy down the street called her a cunt, and I didn't do anything about that either.
Yep. Yeah.
That's the letter he sent to Congress.
Well, it's his feral wife is spitting on their neighbor's car. Having the fact that the neighbors who are this young couple who put up a sign that was fuck Trump or abort the Supreme Court that I guess kicked off this battle of attrition. They called the cops on her. Calling the cops on this daffy 70-year-old bat over a flag war is capture the fucking flag, lady. Jesus Christ. But, I gotta say, this is my favorite. This is my favorite. This is from the CNN. Alito tells lawmakers he will not recuse himself from Supreme Court cases despite flag controversy. And it says repeating claims he had made previously about an upside down flag that flew at his Alexandria, Virginia home in early 2021. Alito said the decision to place the flag was his wife's, and he blamed the decision on a very nasty neighborhood dispute. My wife is a private citizen, and she possesses the same First Amendment rights as every other American, Alito wrote in one of his 2 letters sent to members of Congress. She makes her own decisions, and I have always respected her right to do so. Continuing, my wife is fond of flying flags, Alito wrote. I am not.
That's the money.
It reminds me of the Donald Trump, the beer summit, Elizabeth Warren tweet. Yeah. It's your house, asshole. Would your wife have a job? Is she paying rent? Best I can tell, she's just a frump who loves flags and hates democracy.
Yeah, you're going for Brett Kavanaugh's. I like beer. I drink beer. A lot of Supreme Court justices, they liked it. They have those nice, concise sentences. That's how they got into those positions.
Yeah, I am not a fan of flying flags, but my wife is. And this is all this goofy stuff about flying the flag upside down as a signal of distress right after the election, and then. All of America learned this week about the appeal to heaven flag, which is some goofy QAnon thing. I this is all very much about signaling what appears to be a sitting Supreme Court justice's a household approval of this narrative that Donald Trump was unjustly denied re-election because Joe Biden stole it or something like that.
Yeah, which is relevant because some of those cases are
he's
coming
hearing
before
cases.
the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
exactly.
These are in cases that directly involve this, but Alito's daffy flag wife. I mean, she her beliefs and opinions. That's one thing, but Ginny Thomas is on a completely different level because wasn't she having phone calls the day of January 6th, just literally being when did the secret tribunal start? Has Joe Biden been executed yet?
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah. Ginny Thomas, you can't even call what she believes in QAnon. She believes in a version of Kingdom Hearts where Donald Trump is Sora.
That is exactly what she believes, and she was doing a lot. I mean, I think she was really involved in the run up to the Stop the Steal rally, as I recall. I should probably have that in front of me. But she definitely is a conservative activist, whereas Alito's wife seems to be more of the annoying annoying neighbor variety.
Well, I do think this probably reveals that the two are like walking buddies or something. I mean,
Yeah,
they
for
definitely
sure.
are in the same
Yeah.
circle.
I guess it's just funny because like Ginny Thomas's like undisclosed connections to the people who tried to overturn the election and her numerous ties to like conservative legal groups that have business before the court is like a fairly flagrant violation of like failure to disclose. But I guess just more broadly, what is it about these wives that are so out of pocket? And crucially, why do the men who are spearheading a legal movement to like bring women under control to the listen up females movement to like why can't they control their wives? Why can't they get them to stop doing loony shit like flying flags upside down and spitting on their neighbors?
I mean, I definitely think part of it is almost like mob stuff, right? Where you have all the properties put under the wife's name rather than their own name. It's kind of they have to be blocked off and doing certain things, and so the wife kind of comes in as like this id, kind of more literally in Leo's case, where they can kind of be the nasty person that the Supreme Court justices can't really want to be.
It kind of reminds me of like military wives, where like they always try to take on in the Association of Military Wives the rank of their husband. So like the captain's wife is like bossing around and looking down on the chief's wife, but like who the fuck are you?
Remember all the drama over David Petraeus's biographer who was fucking? Where, like she just like kind of moved into this like Florida military community, like where CENTCOM is, and was like, I'm David Petraeus's biographer, and all the other wives got real salty because she was like, she's giving orders and she's not even in the chain of command.
They start throwing rank. They do it.
Is there like a wife special forces? Like, can you get selected for wife Delta Force?
But you have secret missions for cheating if you do that.
Well, as long as we're talking about military wives, I think the whole flag controversy that's going on right now obscures a much greater scandal at play here, or a much juicier element to the story, because everyone's talking about, is it appropriate to have a sitting Supreme Court justice like household advertise his affinity with a aborted coup attempt? Maybe not, but I think this goes deeper than that. I think all of this flag stuff is about one thing and one thing only: swinging.
Yes.
I think
yes.
I think the appeal to heaven flag is like, I think they're capping that it's a QAnon thing. I think that this is a swinger code in the lifestyle that people use to advertise, hey, we're down to clown.
Yeah, so the upside down flag, that's like anal, probably, right? That's been going on for centuries and no one's even noticed until just now.
Yeah, everyone says it's a signal of distress. It's a signal I'm distressed that no one's fucking my wife.
I'm kind of imagining like the huge gulp before you go in to swing with the Alitos, where you're like, this is good for us, honey, but fuck, man.
It's like all these like Leonard Leo law clerks are just like grimly marching to the orgy like it's the gallows, and they're just thinking like, I'm gonna be a judge one day. I got to make a partner at this law firm that
gotta get it done.
Got to do what you got to do, baby.
One thing I want to say about this letter, the letter that he sends back, I've heard a lot of the SCOTUS commentators talking about this stuff, and I don't really generally talk a lot about Supreme Court because I've listened to you guys for years, and you actually don't get anything wrong about the Supreme Court because it's all an exercise of political power and stuff like this. It's pretty obvious, it's pretty easy. You don't need legal training to figure out what's going on in the hot button cases. But one thing that there are people who really love talking about the Supreme Court, and I don't hear any of them mentioning this. The letter cites to this code of conduct, and he says, well, look, my conduct doesn't meet the standards set forth in the code of conduct. But what I don't hear people talking about is like, this code of conduct just came out. It was just created because of the Ginny Thomas stuff, because of the Clarence Thomas stuff last year. It just came out in November 2023. This event, this Alito letter, is the first test of that code of conduct. And what we find out, the big huddle they did, the drafts going back and forth, the code of conduct they promulgated, what we find out they came up with this beautiful standard is, I get to decide my own recusal. I get to find and frame all the facts and nobody can review my decision. And then I apply the reasonable person standard to the facts I just set out. So the process they came up with is essentially to just take the letter, stick it in my ass, and rub it around until there's a skid mark on it, and throw it in your fucking face.
Alito's wife actually did that to her neighbor.
On the car, too, which is
They stuck it on the windshield of the car after getting a big skid going down it. But I guess to your point about the Supreme Court, like there isn't much like juice there for people who are interested in the law. I mean, obviously its effects on the law are great, but like the essential problem with the Supreme Court as an institution, or at least like the sort of crisis that they're undergoing right now and trying to like sell this idea that they are judicial and not political appointees. And like to that end, did you see Stephen Breyer's? This was a couple months ago. This is in April in the New York Times. This is Stephen Breyer writing in the New York Times op-ed piece. The Supreme Court I served on was made up of friends. And like, I guess what do you make of this effort to like retcon some lost comedy in the Supreme Court? Like he mentions, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Justice Scalia were both huge fans of opera, and they would go to the opera together. And this idea that they can be this like, why is it so important that everyone imagine that these people actually like each other?
Well, I don't think it's a retcon much at all. I think they did like each other, and I think that's why, they would all get together and like 6-0, make it so that, civil liberties were, chipped away at over 20 years or things like class actions, they get sent to arbitration, things like that. I mean, they were able to do that because they all liked each other, I'm sure. Now that things are a little more acrimonious is when you start to see them break down maybe on some of the other issues. But I think in the past, they were all together and they were all together doing bad stuff.
Well, I guess like it's like the utility of the institution functions when it exercises power in a way that people don't notice. Even though we give these fucking mummies like, near godlike authority over our law, it's easier to swallow when there is like some swing votes, or that there's this like I said, this sense of friendship, that they're all just kind of on the same team. I mean, it's kind of similar to the Israel lobby, right? Like, why is it so powerful, or why was it able to exert the level of influences that it does over our government? It's because nobody talks about them or notices it. And what we're seeing now is that like to do their job, they have to exercise power in a very public way, in a way that is very obvious, very, very corrupt, and a way that like sort of makes people question like, hey, is this rational? Like, is this normal?
I think it highlights the contradictions. I think in the same way that Israel now is more directly breaking international humanitarian law standards and processes, makes more people globally look at Israel more critically, as the Supreme Court now has to decide, I mean, things like abortion, but also now that the president is up there saying, hey, I shouldn't be charged, or the former president, I should say, I shouldn't be charged with any crimes ever. And now they have to take a stance on that. It starts to make more naked the stark political reality of the Supreme Court. And I think that, that makes them not allowed to be friends as much anymore.
I also like that era is coming to an end.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, like this whole, I don't know if you recall this, there was this article, or there was a lot of questioning of Nina Totenberg. She's been like the court reporter, essentially the official, friend of all of them, and like goes to their house and has, brunch with all of the justices, and, becomes very buddy with them. But people were started questioning this, like, why are you the official court narrator when you didn't catch any of this shit that people found by just looking at public documents that have Clarence Thomas's name on them? Like, what the fuck happened here? People were trusting you to look into these people and report on them, and all you reported on was like, the fucking scones that they had at breakfast.
And and now whether it's like all of the enormous loans that were just forgiven for like, that were just written off apparently for like Thomas and fucking Kavanaugh. Like the fucking RV that some asshole bought Clarence Thomas,
right?
And when people notice it, or like they're just like, it's still, they have all the power to just be like, no, this is okay, I'm not resigning, or I'm not.
I checked, and I decided. I listen, babe. I'm telling you, I didn't fuck her, and you can't question me on that.
Yeah, don't look at my phone.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely. Like, just to echo Andy's point, it didn't go unnoticed because, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's clerks or whoever's clerks and the justices themselves were all part of the same happy family. They're not going to go after each other, because then everybody just starts recriminating after each other, one after the other. And so that's how they build that comedy. And that's, how they're able to keep the Supreme Court going, even as, bad decision after bad decision happens, over the course of our lifetimes, for sure.
I mean, like, and another like sort of like breakdown in the illusion that allows this institution to continue to exert the outsized power that it does over the law undemocratically. I'm surprised not more was made of the fact that right after the Dobbs decision, like in the month following it, Justice Alito went to Europe and gave a public speech where he basically just spiked the football. He went to a foreign country and gave a speech to like some dinner of like, I don't know, probably like former Nazis or something like that, where he was just like, like I know, like the people who were criticizing this decision, like tough shit. Like, this is what we're doing now.
To be fair, he spiked the football when he leaked the decision like a month early.
True. Yeah.
he was spiking the football in much worse ways for months on end.
In terms of other like weird shit going on with the Supreme Court and the justices who fill it, another thing, like, were you guys following the scandal about Clarence Thomas's clerk, Crystal Clanton?
No, I have not.
Okay, this is Jane Mayer broke this in the New Yorker in February of this year. But Crystal Clanton was the TPUSA director who was known for one thing, and it was the text she sent in 2015 that said, "I hate black people. Like, fuck them all. I hate blacks. End of story."
Nice.
And basically, like,
one thing you don't want to be caught sending a text about.
And basically says, but she's like, she has become like a clerk for Clarence Thomas, and she's become a clerk for Clarence Thomas.
So she changed? We're gonna go after her for changing? That's what we're about now?
People can't apologize.
What's this here? She became a clerk because Ginny Thomas essentially adopted her, and like she moved into the Thomas's house.
This is like reverse Blindside.
I was going to say reverse Get Out. Maybe this is like a reverse Get Out situation.
It says here, the story would likely long be forgotten were it not for an extremely strange plot twist. After the texting scandal, Ginny Thomas, the lobbyist and politically active wife of Clarence Thomas, who had worked closely with Clanton as an advisor to Turning Point, unofficially adopted Clanton as the couple's protege. The Thomases harbor deep anger at the mainstream media, stemming in part from the justice's embattled 1991 confirmation hearing, and evidently saw in Clanton a fellow victim. Soon after leaving Turning Point, Clanton started working for Ginny Thomas. Remarkably, the Thomases then invited Clanton to live with them at their home in Exurban, Virginia, for the better part of the next year. The couple encouraged Clanton to go to law school, and Justice Thomas himself recommended her when she was successfully applied to the Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University. Justice Thomas also helped Clanton, who graduated in 2022, line up a prestigious judicial clerkship with Chief Judge William H. Pryor of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. Supreme Court clerkships was left for a year, extremely valuable in both professional and financial terms. But like, so like, yeah, they just adopted this crazy woman, and now she's a clerk for Justice Thomas. But like, once again, swinging.
Yeah, that's it. That's
I was
exactly
going to say,
what
actually,
it is.
I think you already explained this one.
What is at the heart of the American system of law? It's sucking and fucking.
Now we got to investigate Clarence Thomas's house and see what kind of flags they're flying over there. There's going to be like a burning Romanian flag or something, and it's going to look very, very impartial.
They're going to find a pineapple flag.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then, like, I mean, like you mentioned this code of conduct, which is basically only exists because of Ginny Thomas. I think it's really funny. It's like none of these other justices' spouses are like causing actually like codes of conduct to be written. But like, have you been watching Dick Durbin's absolutely pathetic debasement of himself, where he just keeps whinging to he's like, this is on Justice Roberts. Justice Roberts needs to adhere to the code of conduct. And then Justice Roberts just today just said, no, I'm not going to do anything about this. But like, he's on the Judiciary Committee. He's not even going to hold a hearing about this shit.
I have never seen someone follow the Montenegrin 10 Commandments as loyally as Dick Durbin. That is a man who he abhors work.
Yeah, the Alito letter is actually pretty funny in this regard, because if you'll notice, the Durbin letter goes to John Roberts and says, hey, you gonna fucking do something about this? And what Alito says in the letter is, look, I'm responding to you directly, because if you look at the code of conduct, I get to judge my own case. So next time, why don't you just fucking at me directly? Don't talk to my boss. And then he spins into his letter. So it's pretty funny because he's just getting dog walked.
Well, I mean, like, given that the problem of the Supreme Court looks like it's going to continue existing, I'm wondering, like, what are the remedies for something like this? I mean, people talk about impeaching justices or stacking the court, which are like currently not on offer, nor will they be on offer until there's a Democratic president.
I mean, I think this goes to the ethos of our podcast, but it definitely won't involve lawyers. I think all the solutions involve things other than lawyers, and we're happy to help, but it's got to start from somewhere else.
That's right. It's going to involve operators.
And a lot of swinging.
Well, I wanted to go down the list of like, since like I said, like maybe not of the most interesting legal, but it certainly has like huge ramifications for the country we live in. The New York Times has a rundown of the major Supreme Court cases for 2024. These are the ones that are coming up in the next session. The first of them is immunity for former presidents, Trump v. the United States. It will decide whether former President Donald J. Trump is immune from prosecution on charges that he plotted to subvert the 2020 election. And now this gets into like Ginny Thomas and the Alito Trump wife, because these guys, I mean, they're going to be sitting to hear this case to decide whether it's legal for a president to try to overturn the peaceful transition of power in this country. But it says here, are there recent rulings on this subject? It says in 2020, the Supreme Court ruled by a 7-2 vote in Trump v. Vance that Mr. Trump had no absolute right to block the release of his financial records in a criminal investigation. But like, given what we know of the Supreme Court, like, can one make a pretty good bet how they're going to vote on this?
I think definitely there's no way that they will reach a ruling that says that presidents can interfere with the. There's no way they're going to say he's totally immune from prosecution for that sort of thing. They don't want that rule going forward, and they don't care about Trump enough for this. No matter what you think about these people politically, maybe Alito, maybe Thomas, but ultimately what they'll say is not like, yes, he should be immune, and so should every president. They'll find some way to like decide on some other ground or say this case is improvidently granted. They'll dodge, but I do not think you're going to find a controlling ruling from the Supreme Court saying, yeah, presidents are totally immune. Fuck everybody.
Like, why would they give more immunity and power to the executive branch? Because they're sitting pretty right now. The judicial branch of the federal government, the Supreme Court and the federal court system, they are de facto legislators now. They have more power than Congress does. So like I agree. I don't know why they would give a get out of jail free card to any president, even if they did appoint them, because it's like, the larger precedent needs to be set that the Supreme Court is truly the godlike authority in this country, not the president or the voters.
Yeah, and you certainly don't want that rule in place when the wrong president's in.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It would give Biden like 6 months to just kind of set all the rules for himself.
I mean, there are other cases about obstruction charges for the January 6th assault. This is Fisher v. the United States. Will decide whether prosecutors can use a federal obstruction statute to charge rioters involved in the Capitol attack on January 6th. Not so much interested in that one. But the other big one is the Food and Drug Administration versus the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine. And basically, this is one that will decide whether, like, the FDA guidelines for distributing the commonly used abortion pill, it's I don't know how to pronounce this right, the drug misoprostol. But basically, it will determine whether access to that drug, which is like basically the most commonly used form of pharmaceutical form of terminating a pregnancy, which is used in like basically the majority of abortion in the United States use this drug. So this is basically like deciding whether the federal government can outlaw abortion even further. But what would the ramifications of this one be? Because like this one's a little bit, I think they're obviously going to decide that it is illegal, that you can't mail this drug across state lines, or if not, make it illegal outright. I mean, what do you think was going to happen in this case?
I agree. I think they're going to find some states' rights thing that they get to also co-regulate, or they can decide for the health. You know, health has always long been a protected subject matter for states to regulate internally, and they'll do a bunch of historical bullshit about how states have always governed health, within their borders and something like that. And there's no way they're going to say, no, it's perfectly fine for them to mail it across to states that have outlawed it.
I mean, I guess just like, we saw what happened with Dobbs, and we know that like, they're not done yet. I mean, I guess like, I'm sort of horrified, but also fascinated to see what's going to happen if like they push this much further in terms of like, how can you govern a country in which like the vast majority of people like believe morally and legally in a woman's right to terminate a pregnancy, with these judges just deciding that no, that's not the case. Like you can change the law, and they have the power to do that, but like they can't change the culture, which has now lived for generations with like equal rights for women being like the standard accepted, like,
right.
I mean, I think we're kind of seeing how that's going to happen. Where like the structural advantage for Republicans in congressional races is disappearing. It's fundamentally altering the like political baseline for America in that way. But for the most part, it's just going to be like that and a one of the only shots in the arms for Democrats on a presidential level.
I think that's true, but I mean, you're seeing already in the polling in this election that it's not going to be the be all and end all, right?
Right.
And so I think you look at the way the Supreme Court works. One of the ways it was taught to me is that it kind of acts almost like a moat or a channel for like popular pressure, right? That when this popular pressure builds up, they'll subtly alter the law so that it doesn't blow up. I mean, here we're seeing the opposite, right? The Supreme Court is essentially damning kind of the fight for abortion rights. And so I think you're going to see the opposite thing, you know, not necessarily in the case of like abortion terrorism or anything like that, but people are going to find their own solutions, you know, in contravention of state laws. I mean, whether that's just smuggling it in and, you know, a breakdown in interstate commerce or what have you. I don't know, but you know, you're going to see people go around this, and they're going to go around it to the extent, you know, that they can, whether or not the political or legal system is there to be in their way.
The next big case is one that concerns the Second Amendment rights of domestic abusers, and it will decide whether a federal law that makes it a crime for people subject to domestic violence restraining orders to own guns violates the Second Amendment. This has got to be the easiest one to predict. Yeah. They're going to decide that, there is no way you can restrict the right to own a gun if you have a restraining order taken out against you or domestic violence charges.
That would be a wild pivot given the last like 20 years of Second Amendment jurisprudence. Be like, this one thing definitely you can do. That's the one.
You're probably right, but all I'll say is that a friend of mine who used to do Second Amendment stuff at DOJ Civil Appellate, he said that the big case, the big Second Amendment case is called Heller. And essentially the case is like this big, long historical treatise. It's fucking insufferable and very long. And it said that it included one little line that said this case is not meant to alter, the longstanding ability of states and, federal government to regulate for, health and safety reasons or whatever, to regulate for certain, use of guns, possession of guns for, legitimate purposes. And basically everybody who brings Second Amendment cases, they all cite the whole opinion. And then the people who are defending the statutes and restrictions, they cite that other little line I just said. And I don't know here. I'm not sure. I agree with you. That's probably how it's going to come out. You have a conservative court, it's probably how it's going to come out. But I don't know that they're going to square and say that there's no way for a state to find that these are dangerous people and maybe you can't have a gun. That's probably a crazy opinion, and I'll have it done on my face later. But I could see them holding the line there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're not regulating the guns, right? You're regulating the people, which is, I guess, the dark lining of that cloud.
Guns are people too, my friend.
Yeah, that's fair.
It just seems like in both instances, it seems like one of those things where it reminds me of like the Trump people that want to kill the administrative state, where it's like, yeah, I understand that it's like a deep ideological project of the right, obviously, but I feel like even like 20 years ago, people on the right would have kind of implicitly understood, well, you can't completely get rid of these things that are barely holding everything together, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But
I think the story of the last 5 years is that people are slowly finding out that you can, in fact, take these things out one by one, and the whole thing still stands. So
yeah.
I guess like to move from the Supreme Court to another even more farcical realm of the law. And I'm glad I have two lawyers on the show today, because this is a question I've been asking myself for the past week. Because my subscription to the Atlantic magazine, when the Atlantic magazine arrives, I go straight for the war crimes apology section. But everyone saw this guy Graham Wood writing in the Atlantic.
Oh,
so let me just ask the two lawyers here. Is it sometimes legally permissible to kill children?
Sometimes different countries have different standards about child murder, and that's okay.
But like more broadly speaking, if the state of Supreme Court jurisprudence is an absurd farce, that they're more than willing to just completely trash in front of everyone's view if it helps them get what they want, then international law has got to be even more of a fucking it's just car wreck right now. Because it actually doesn't surprise me that it is in fact legal to kill children under certain circumstances. Provided, but what do you make of the ongoing legal battles and court cases involving Israel?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, Actually, let me step back. I think, like the Supreme Court, a lot of the power, quote unquote, with international law lies in its kind of ability to shape perceptions and politics and things like that. I think with international law, the difference is there's practically zero kind of mystification of that process. Everyone kind of acknowledges that when international law kind of they release an order, it's there's no one to enforce it. So with that in mind, I mean, you're certainly seeing a change in the perception of Israel kind of globally, but it doesn't amount to dick all in terms of the realities on the ground with respect to Gaza or even the West Bank.
I think that's right. I admit that when the ICJ stuff first started happening, I had a bit of a cynical view of like, this isn't going to do anything because that's how it always has worked. But I think that's maybe a little too cynical. There's something that's different going on in the international order right now. Generally, the ICJ, the ICC, the Hague, all this stuff, this is for African warlords. That's the only people that get dragged into these places.
African warlords and Serbians, yeah.
And Serbians, exactly. Right. Those are the only people who get picked up, is like people who don't have perhaps, like Western political power behind them. But all of a sudden, Israel's being dragged in and is like, at least having trouble procedurally at these institutions. They don't, they're not finding themselves governed by it, but something has changed because Israel has tremendous Western backing from the biggest Western backer there is, but it's not letting up. It's not insulating them or inoculating them. And so something's a little different. And I find that, encouraging.
Yeah, certainly standing up to a global hegemon like that. I mean, America does not want any of this stuff to be happening. No way, no how. So there is something, going a little awry in terms of these global institutions. I do think, now that I think about it a little more, it does kind of have a flavor of that like epic Sotomayor descent, right? Where it's like you're losing in such a spectacular way that it almost seems cool that you're losing. But again, at the end of the day, Israel gets to persecute its war in Rafah and Gaza and Palestine generally. And only the actual U.S. power can stop it.
Right. But I would say, though, like, to Andy's point, it's not nothing, because it did sort of herald like actual meaningful changes from the diplomatic apparatuses of some pretty significant countries. I mean, we have seen Spain recognize Palestine, which is, people also tried to downplay that a little bit, but that is pretty significant in and of itself. And I think it generally, more than anything, it doesn't really show like any legal consequence. Like, that's probably not happening anytime soon. But it does mark like Israel being made more of a pariah state, which I think is unambiguously a positive thing.
Yeah, I think it shifts kind of, there is a change in the situation. It's just we don't know how durable that's really going to be.
Yeah, I mean, generally though, like these things, like, people don't go back on them, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And like, whether it amounts to any like actual exercise of power is a different question. But I think it's telling, to like a vivid illustration of just how vulnerable Israel regards itself to international law, because it just came out that they've been blackmailing an ICC judge for like years now.
Yeah.
Like up to like literally saying like, hey, you don't want to touch this. Think of your family. And like, and this has been going on for years. And this story, like the Israeli press broke it and had it for years, but was subject to some sort of like internal censorship by the Israeli government. That like, yeah, like it does seem like they have like, they're just like a hall monitor who's saying, hey, don't do that. And as long as Israel is protected by the United States, they can say, go fuck yourselves. But like internally, I think they feel very vulnerable to this, because otherwise they wouldn't be going out of their way to blackmail the justices who preside over these cases that concern their conduct in the West Bank and Gaza.
Yeah, it's hard to know what they feel vulnerable to. Like when I think about, I remember thinking about this. We did an episode a long time ago on BDS, and there's something that Israel does, and I don't know that it necessarily means that they feel vulnerable, but you have this like protection of Israel, like we use this in the like a persistent, broad scale attack on any kind of speech that's anti-Israel. And I don't think they feel threatened by BDS movements, but what they want is to stamp out anything that could become a fire. Even a tiny little, a matchstick is worthy of attention. And certainly, the ICJ judge or something. So I don't know if they feel threatened by it. It might just be part of their broad attack, but I hope they do.
I think that's partially true, and I do think also the U.S. has a worry about what is happening right now. As blasé as they've been about all this, I think the U.S. and Europe both do not want to see their project of international humanitarian law as kind of Mickey Mouse as it's been almost since its inception. I don't think they like that Israel is so blatantly just shitting all over it, because it robs them of their ability to intervene in places like Taiwan and Korea and Ukraine.
Israel to try and get inside the head of the Hezbollah apparatus and how just they respond both as a state and as a lobby to these sort of things. Their greatest fear is that in some sense that they both get treated like a normal country that's doing these things, but also that they don't get treated like a normal country. The position of the Israeli center left for the past 30 years has been, let's calm down on the West Bank stuff with nothing in respect to any of Israel's international wars or its conduct in Gaza, because the West Bank, to them, that's the most not a normal country thing that they do, right?
Right.
For stuff like BDS, I don't feel like they think that it will economically ruin Israel, right? But they're afraid because it takes Israel outside of the realm of normal countries in the eyes of most people. It makes people think of them in the same way that people, thought of South Africa in the 80s. I think that's sort of the calculus behind what does and doesn't frighten them. This is definitely one of those things.
I agree with Andy that from the outside looking in, it seems like all of these legal bodies and or voices of protest really don't amount to shit. But the thing is, they are fought vociferously, and I think you're exactly right that it's just I think they're aware that support for Israel is a mile wide and an inch deep, and I don't think it's really motivated by anything other than inertia. And I think any crack in that's allowed to open, it just imperils the entire project. But as far as the United States go, I don't think we like international law so much as we're the ones writing it, but
right.
they cannot be thrilled at having to say in the pages of the Atlantic that international law means that you can on some occasions genocide a few kids.
Yeah.
You can kill
right.
some. Look, international law means it is permissible to kill children. Okay, we never said it wasn't. That's not what humanitarian law really means. You sometimes you gotta say fuck them kids.
Yeah, and there are standards that apply there, but I don't know if Graham Wood's article really raises them about whether it's worth talking about distinction and proportionality, because ultimately what's going on, those are the standards that apply. Ultimately what matters is, have you identified a military target? And if you can frame your claim as I'm targeting something that's a military target, then distinction and proportionality come in. Is it proportional to the value of the military target? But all of that just becomes something that the aggressor, in this case Israel, will just frame as, it was a military target. That wedding was a military target. No matter what they're targeting becomes, somebody's hiding among them. It was an extremely valuable person that was hiding among them. And then you can put as many kids as you fucking want in the envelope.
I think we should leave it there for today. I don't have anything more for you gentlemen. I would just like to wish best of luck to Donald J. Trump in surviving Emerald City, Oz.
Thanks.
I mean, look, I think it would be awesome if Trump got sent to prison. I really do. Honestly, I don't care how just or unjust it would be. I just think it would be hilarious, especially if he had access to a cell phone.
Imagine if he could escape. That'd be a fun day.
I'm putting a team together.
Someone will probably try.
That will be a great day.
Can you think of a more reliably pro-Trump bloc than prison guards?
Right.
Yeah. Or
the Nazi gang, maybe.
Yeah.
Or felons themselves.
Are you remitted into custody after something like this? Even if he's out immediately on some kind of bail or something, does he even need to get processed into jail? What happens when you're convicted of 34 felony counts immediately after?
You wouldn't have to report until after sentencing, usually, I think.
Okay.
I mean, now he's in the weird case where if he starts violating his gag orders and now is a 34 count felon.
I find it hard to believe Trump would violate a gag order. So, like, wait, if he just continues talking shit about this judge, can they just put him in prison?
Well, the way contempt orders work is usually it's escalating. First, it starts with something small, and the judge has to start small. You start with money. But then, I mean, the judge does have access to any and all remedies. I mean, to be honest, they have access to significant remedies if they want to start issuing criminal contempt orders or something. But usually you start small. And then you hope that they comply, and then maybe the fines get bigger. Maybe there's a day of imprisonment or something. It can get bad, but I doubt we're going to see something like that.
I mean, there are already fines, as I recall.
Right.
I believe he's already been fined. So,
Well, as Trump said, my best friends are lawyers. Because I mean, is there anyone in Donald Trump's life that he does have like a closer relationship to than the various lawyers that he's fucked over and stiffed throughout his entire
not
career?
even his own children, I would think.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it there for today. Andy and Tim, I want to thank you so much for coming by and sharing with us some of your expertise on legal matters. And everyone, like and subscribe to ALAB, the All Lawyers Are Bastards podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Cheers, everybody. Until next time. Bye-bye.